They say the modern world was built to save time, to make life easier, to give us control over the chaos of nature through the miracle of technology. But in the Lamar Valley of Wyoming, time isn't something you save, it's something you survive. And control? Control is an illusion sold to city folk who've never stood face to face with a 2,000-pound force of nature that remembers when your great-grandfather's grandfather was still learning to walk. This is the story of how Jack Miller learned that some wisdom can't be downloaded, some connections can't be streamed, and some guardians can't be tracked by satellites orbiting 200 miles above the Earth. This is the story of the day technology failed, and Barron showed them why. Welcome back to the Broken Compass Ranch. 3 weeks had passed since Jack's first encounter with Barron. 3 weeks since that midnight moment when the great bull had smelled Silas's jacket and allowed Jack to touch his scarred face. 3 weeks of cautious optimism and careful distance. Jack sat on the porch of the ranch house, a tablet glowing in his hands. Around him, the November Valley stretched out like an unread book, vast and indifferent to human ambition. He was trying to bring order to the chaos his father had left behind. In his city life, order came from spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Here, he decided, order would come from technology. The Eagle Eye 1000 drone hovered 500 feet above the grazing herd, its 4K camera beaming back crystal-clear images to Jack's tablet. He could see every animal, could zoom in close enough to count the flies on their backs, could track their movements across the pasture without ever leaving the comfort of the porch. "This is how you run a modern ranch," Jack muttered to himself, adjusting the joystick with practiced precision. Dad would have loved this if he'd just given technology a chance. Maya watched from the doorway, her expression skeptical. She'd spent the morning reading more of Silas's journals, learning about the old ways, about how her grandfather had walked among the herd daily, had known each animal by sight, by behavior, by the unique patterns in their fur. "You know they can hear that thing, right? The herd. They don't like it." "They don't have to like it," Jack replied, not looking up from the screen. "They just have to get used to it. This drone lets me monitor them from a safe distance. I can check on them multiple times a day without disturbing them, without risking another charge like the one that nearly killed me." Grandpa didn't use drones. "Grandpa spent 50 years earning their trust. I've got maybe 6 months before the bank starts calling about the mortgage. I need efficient solutions, Maya, not romantic notions about the old ways." On the screen, the herd shifted nervously as the drone descended lower. Jack was trying to get a better look at one of the cows he thought might be pregnant. The machine's propellers created a high-pitched whine that carried across the valley. Then, suddenly, a massive shadow crossed the camera's view. Barron. The great bull appeared on screen, his scarred face turning upward toward the drone. He didn't flee like the younger animals, didn't panic or run. He simply stood there, perfectly still, staring at the mechanical intruder with those dark, intelligent eyes. "Back it off, Dad," Maya said, her voice tense. "You're making him angry." "He's fine. It's just a drone. He can't even reach it from down there." But Barron wasn't trying to reach the drone. He was studying it, analyzing it, making a decision. With a sudden, sharp grunt that Jack could hear even through the tablet's tiny speakers, Barron signaled to the herd. The sound was authoritative, commanding, and the response was immediate. In an instant, the peaceful grazing turned into coordinated movement. The entire herd began moving as one organism, flowing across the pasture like a dark river, heading toward the trees where the drone couldn't follow effectively. "No, no, no," Jack hissed, trying to track them, but the signal began to flicker. The hills and valleys of the broken compass created dead zones, shadows where radio waves couldn't penetrate. The image on his screen pixelated, froze, then cut to black. "Connection lost," the tablet announced cheerfully. Jack looked up from his screen, squinting against the afternoon sun. The herd was disappearing into the tree line, following Barron's lead. And there, at the edge of the forest, Barron stopped and looked back toward the house. Even from a quarter-mile away, Jack could feel the weight of that gaze, the judgment in it. While Jack had been watching the world through a 5-inch screen, the real world had been watching him back and finding him wanting. The dust cloud appeared just after noon the next day. It wasn't the erratic, swirling dust of a panicked calf or the low-hanging haze of a moving herd. This was different. A straight, aggressive line cutting across the valley floor, approaching the ranch at exactly the speed limit. Calculated, deliberate, wrong. A black SUV, pristine and absurdly out of place, pulled up to the ranch gate. The vehicle was worth more than Jack's annual salary back in Denver. Tinted windows, chrome that gleamed even through the dust. A machine built for boardrooms and country clubs, not for Wyoming ranch roads. Two men stepped out. They wore expensive outdoor gear, the kind sold in glossy catalogs to people who would never actually get dirty. Their boots looked fresh from the box. Their smiles were professional, practiced, and didn't reach their eyes. "Mr. Miller?" the taller one called out, holding a tablet of his own. This one had a gold-rimmed case. "I'm Marcus Thorne from Evergreen Developments. This is my associate, Mr. Chen. We had several conversations with your father before his unfortunate passing." Jack stepped off the porch, feeling the weight and comfort of Silas's canvas jacket on his shoulders. It had become his uniform, his armor. "My father never mentioned any developers." Thorne chuckled, a dry sound that carried no warmth. "Silas was a man of principles, Jack. May I call you Jack? He believed in the old ways, but principles don't pay property taxes. Principles don't settle debts. The ranch isn't for sale." "We're not here to buy the ranch," Chen interjected smoothly. His accent suggested education at prestigious universities, money from old sources. "We're here to help you preserve it, to honor your father's legacy while ensuring your financial security." Thorne pulled up something on his tablet and turned it toward Jack. It was a 3D rendering of the Broken Compass Ranch, but transformed. Luxury cabins nestled into the hillsides, a main lodge where the barn currently stood, hiking trails marked in green. Ecotourism, sustainable, profitable. Your bison become part of the attraction. Guided viewing tours, photography experiences. We're talking about generating revenue that would dwarf anything your father made selling meat. And what happens to the herd, to Barron? The two men exchanged a glance. It was quick, but Jack caught it. They'd prepared for this question. The more docile animals would remain as part of the experience. The dangerous ones. "Barron isn't leaving," Jack said flatly. "This is his land, has been for 20 years. "Jack," Chen said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone, "we've done our research. That particular bull has a documented history of aggression.
He nearly killed your neighbor, Clayton Webb. He destroyed your ATV. He's a liability. In our business plan, animals like that are relocated to sanctuaries, or what?" Thorne cleared his throat. "Or humanely euthanized, for everyone's safety." The words hung in the air like poison. Jack felt his hands curl into fists inside the jacket pockets. Liz had come out onto the porch now, Maya beside her, his family watching this confrontation. "You need to leave," Jack said quietly. "Now." "Think about it," Thorne said, handing Jack a business card that probably cost more to print than most people spent on groceries. "We've seen the tax liens, the outstanding loans. Silas was holding on by his fingernails. We're the rope that keeps you from falling." As they climbed back into their ridiculous SUV and drove away, leaving a trail of exhaust that smelled like everything Jack had left behind in the city, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The tire tracks, the distinctive tread pattern where they'd turned around. They matched perfectly with the tracks he'd found that first night, the mysterious midnight visitor. These men hadn't just started watching the ranch. They'd been scouting it, evaluating it, waiting. And somewhere out there beyond the ridge, Barron stood watch, always watching, always remembering.
The storm came 3 days later, building throughout the afternoon like a dark prophecy. The sky turned that particular shade of bruised purple that Montana natives recognize as dangerous. Not rain, dry lightning, the kind that starts forest fires and kills cattle in open fields. Jack had spent the morning implementing his next technological solution, GPS tracking collars for the younger calves, small, supposedly unobtrusive devices that would let him monitor the most vulnerable members of the herd in real time. No more guessing, no more walking through mud and danger, just clean data and peace of mind. "Luna's collar is showing a strong signal," he told Maya, pointing at the map on his laptop screen. "See? Right there with the rest of the herd. This system works. This is how we protect them." Maya had said nothing, but her expression spoke volumes. She'd been spending more time alone, walking the property, studying the land the way Silas's journals suggested. She'd found her grandfather's whistle, a simple piece of carved elk bone in his desk drawer. She carried it everywhere now, though she'd never blown it, not yet. The first crack of thunder came at 4 in the afternoon. It wasn't the distant rumble of a normal storm. It was close, sharp, violent, the sound of the sky tearing open. And with it came the electromagnetic pulse that fried every electronic system on the ranch. "What the?" stared at his laptop as the screen went black. The battery indicator showed full charge, but the computer was dead, completely unresponsive. "Dad?" Maya's voice carried from the barn. "The power's out. Everything's down." Jack tried to reboot the laptop. Nothing. He grabbed his tablet. Black screen. His phone showed no signal, not unusual for the valley, but it wouldn't even turn on. The backup generator that should have kicked in automatically remained silent. And then the rain came. Not the gentle Montana drizzle, but a wall of water that turned the world into a gray blur in seconds. "The GPS collars!" Jack shouted, running toward the barn. "I need to check if they're still transmitting." But when he reached the equipment room, he found Maya staring at the backup monitor, the one that ran on battery power,
and should have been immune to the pulse. The screen showed only error messages, red text cascading down like blood. Signal lost, caller 7 offline. Signal lost, caller 12 offline. Signal lost, caller 3 offline. One by one, every GPS device went dark. "Which one is Luna?" Jack asked, his voice tight with panic. "The calf with the white patch. Which number did I give her?" Maya checked the log sheet with trembling hands. "Caller 3. Dad, she's offline. We don't know where she is." Jack stared at the useless equipment, thousands of dollars in technology, rendered worthless by a force of nature that had been splitting the sky long before humans invented electricity. His carefully constructed system of control had collapsed in seconds. "The drone," he said desperately. "We can use the drone to search." "But the storm's too strong," Liz said from the doorway. "You can't fly in this wind, and even if you could, you can't see anything through the rain." Jack sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Every solution he'd implemented, every modern tool he'd deployed, had failed simultaneously. And now a vulnerable calf was out there somewhere, separated from the herd, in a storm that could kill her in a dozen different ways. Maya didn't say anything. She simply grabbed a heavy rain slicker from the hook, picked up one of Silas's old flashlights, the kind that ran on manual cranks, not batteries, and headed for the door. "Maya, wait!" Jack called. "Where you going?" "To find her the old way, the way Grandpa would have." "You don't even know where to start looking." Maya pulled out the leather-bound journal she'd been carrying everywhere. She opened it to a page marked with a piece of faded ribbon. On it was a hand-drawn map in Silas's precise handwriting. "When the sky burns, follow the king. He knows where the wind sleeps." Jack looked at the cryptic words. "What does that even mean?" "It means Baron will know where she is," Maya said. "Animals like him, they sense things we can't. They know the land in ways our satellites never will. We just have to trust him to show us." "That's insane. We can't follow Baron in a storm. We don't even know where he is." Maya met her father's eyes. "Then I guess it's a good thing I've been watching him. Every morning for the past week, Dad, while you were staring at screens, I was learning, and I know exactly where he'll be." She walked out into the storm before Jack could stop her.
They found Baron exactly where Maya had predicted, at the edge of Devil's Throat, a jagged ravine that cut through the northern pasture like a wound in the earth. It was a dangerous place on calm days. In a storm like this, with flash floods turning the ravine into a raging torrent, it was deadly. Jack had followed Maya on horseback, neither of them speaking, the wind and rain making conversation impossible anyway. His modern rain jacket, bought from an outdoor store for $200, had leaked within minutes. Maya wore Silas's old oilskin coat, 60 years old and still perfectly waterproof. The symbolism wasn't lost on Jack. Through the sheets of rain and the constant flash of lightning, they saw him. Baron stood at the very edge of the ravine, his massive bulk planted like a mountain that storms could break themselves against. Behind him, partially hidden by a thicket of mountain mahogany, something small and pale moved. "Is that her?" Jack had to shout over the roar of wind and water. Maya raised her binoculars, old military surplus from Silas's collection,
No batteries required. "It's Luna. She's trapped behind some fallen logs. The ground's too unstable to reach her from this side." Jack dismounted, his boots immediately sinking into mud that grabbed at his ankles. He started toward Barron, but the great bull responded instantly. His head lowered, his front hoof pawed the ground once, a clear warning, and he let out a bellow that cut through the storm like a knife. Jack froze. "Barron, it's me! We're trying to help!" But Barron didn't recognize him, or didn't care. The bull's entire focus was on protecting the calf that was trapped, and in his ancient instincts, anything approaching was a threat. "He won't let us close," Jack yelled back to Maya. "The ground's too soft here anyway. If we try to cross, we'll start a mudslide right onto Luna." Jack tried to circle around, to find another approach, but Barron matched his movements, always positioning himself between Jack and the calf. The bull's intelligence was terrifying. He wasn't just reacting, he was thinking, planning, outmaneuvering. "Dad, stop! You're making it worse!" Jack backed away, defeated. The calf's frightened bleating cut through the storm. They were so close, but Barron's protection was absolute. Without his cooperation, Luna would die there, and they were powerless to prevent it. Maya stood in the rain, water streaming down her face, her hand clutched around something in her coat pocket. She looked at Barron, really looked at him, not as a dangerous animal, but as a guardian doing what guardians do, protecting the helpless, standing firm when everything else falls apart, just like Silas had taught him. She pulled out the elk bone whistle. It was small, simple, worn smooth by her grandfather's lips over decades of use. She held it up, and lightning flashed, illuminating the scene like something from mythology. Girl and beast, the old way and the new generation. "Maya, what are you doing?" Jack called. She didn't answer. Instead, she brought the whistle to her lips, but she didn't blow it like a command, sharp and demanding. She remembered something from Silas's journal. Barron responds to songs, not orders, to echoes, not commands. Speak to him like the land speaks, patient, eternal, true. Maya blew the whistle softly, a long, low note that mimicked the sound of wind through pine trees, the sound of the valley itself, translated into breath and bone. The effect was instantaneous. Barron's head came up, his ears swiveled forward. The tension in his massive shoulders melted away like snow in spring sun. Maya blew again, the same long tone, an echo of her grandfather's voice carried through wood and air and memory. Barron took a step back from the edge, then another. His eyes, one scarred by lightning, both filled with intelligence that bordered on the supernatural, locked on Maya. She stepped forward, still playing that single, endless note. The rain soaked her to the bone. Lightning split the sky. But in that moment, there was only the girl and the guardian and the ancient song that connected them. Barron lowered his head, not in threat, in recognition. He stepped aside. Behind him, Luna bleated weakly, stuck in the mud and logs, but otherwise unharmed. Barron had been standing guard over her for who knows how long, keeping predators away, preventing her from sliding into the ravine, waiting for help that could speak the language he understood. Maya lowered the whistle and began the careful work of rescuing the calf. Barron watched, but didn't interfere. He'd made his choice. He'd passed guardianship, temporary, conditional, but real, to this girl who smelled like Silas's old coat and played her grandfather's song. Jack stood in the rain, watching his daughter do what all his technology couldn't, watching Baron, the dangerous, unpredictable, supposedly untamable Baron, defer to a 16-year-old girl with a piece of carved bone. And for the second time since coming to the Broken Compass Ranch, Jack felt his understanding of the world crack and reform into something older and truer than anything he learned in the city.
They got Luna back to the barn as the storm finally broke. The calf was cold, exhausted, and scared, but otherwise healthy. Maya stayed with her, rubbing her down with old towels, talking to her in low, soothing tones that reminded Jack painfully of his father. Outside, the clouds parted like curtains, revealing a moon 3/4 full and bright enough to cast shadows. The valley steamed as the temperature dropped, creating a mist that made everything look ghostly and unreal. Jack stood in the barn doorway, watching Baron on the distant ridge. The great bull hadn't followed him back. He'd returned to his post, to his herd, to his eternal vigil. But before he'd left, he'd done something that Jack would replay in his mind for the rest of his life. Baron had walked past Maya, close enough to touch, and he'd lowered his scarred face just for a moment, letting her hand rest on that old wound. A transfer of trust, a bridge built between the wild and the bloodline of the man they'd both loved. "You were right," Jack said quietly as Maya emerged from Luna's stall, "about everything, the technology, the old ways. I was so busy trying to control things that I forgot the whole point was just to be here, to be present." Maya looked at her father. She was covered in mud and hay and probably several kinds of bison-related substances. Her expensive smartphone was cracked and waterlogged in her pocket, but she'd never looked more alive. Grandpa didn't control 'em. He didn't try to manage 'em or track 'em or make 'em into data points. He just listened, learned their language, became part of their world instead of trying to make them part of his. Jack looked down at his hands. They were covered in mud and blood, his own from a scrape he didn't remember getting. No longer the clean hands of an accountant, becoming, slowly, the calloused hands of a rancher. "I don't know if I can do what he did. I don't have his gift, his patience, his whatever it was that let him connect with Baron." "Maybe not, but I think I might." She said it simply, without pride or fear, just a statement of fact. And Jack realized she was right. Whatever gene or gift or connection Silas had possessed, it had skipped a generation. His son had gotten the analytical mind, the head for numbers, but his daughter had gotten the voice. They stood together in the barn doorway, father and daughter, watching the mist rise and the moon shine on a valley that had been there long before them and would be there long after. Somewhere in the darkness, Baron stood watch, the judge of the valley, the keeper of echoes, the guardian of a legacy that was just beginning to reveal its true shape. "What did Evergreen Developments want? Those men in the SUV. I saw you talking to them." Jack hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. "They want to turn the ranch into a resort, high-end ecotourism. They offered enough money to clear Dad's debts and set us up for life. And Baron? They'd relocate him or put him down. They didn't much care which." Maya's jaw tightened. "They can't have him or the land. This isn't about money, Dad. This is about something bigger." I know. Do you? Because 3 weeks ago you were talking about selling the herd and going back to Denver. Now you're standing here in Grandpa's jacket like you belong here. What changed? Jack thought about Barron charging him, about nearly dying in the mud, about that midnight moment when the great bull had smelled Silas's ghost on the canvas and made his choice, about watching his daughter speak a language he could never learn. Everything changed, he said quietly, and maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what Dad wanted, not for me to step into his boots exactly, but to find my own way of protecting what he built. Ma nodded, satisfied. Then she pulled something from her pocket. It was a small metal object, about the size of a thumb drive, but it wasn't a thumb drive. It had an antenna and what looked like a solar panel, professional grade, expensive, and stamped with a logo, Evergreen Geological Survey. "Where did you find that?" Jack asked, his voice tight. "Near Devil's Throat. There are more of them, Dad. I saw at least 3 others before the rain got too heavy. They're not tourism developers, they're surveyors. They want what's under the land, not on top of it." Jack took the device, turning it over in his hands. Marcus Thorne's words came back to him. "We've seen the tax liens. Silas was holding on by his fingernails." How did they see the tax liens? Those were private records. Unless they'd been planning this for months, years maybe, waiting for Silas to die or fail, waiting for an inexperienced heir they could pressure or buy out. And Barron standing guard every night, watching for intruders, knowing somehow that the threat was real. "We need to call Clayton and the sheriff if they've been trespassing to plant survey equipment." "They'll just come back with lawyers and mining rights," Maya interrupted. "You know how this works, Dad. Big companies always win. Unless what?" Maya looked out at the ridge where Barron's silhouette was barely visible against the moonlit sky. "Unless the land decides it doesn't want to be developed, unless someone stands in the way and refuses to move." She meant Barron, Jack realized, the dangerous, aggressive, legally liable bull that Evergreen would use as their excuse to take control. He killed someone, or he's a public safety threat. Courts would side with the developers, Barron would be destroyed, and the ranch would be lost. Unless Jack could prove that Barron wasn't a threat, that he was manageable, that the ranch could continue operating safely under Miller ownership. And how could he prove that when Barron had nearly killed him 3 weeks ago? The answer stood in front of him, covered in mud, holding a piece of carved bone that connected 3 generations. You'd have to work with him, really work with him, daily, the way Dad did. Show the courts that he responds to proper handling, that he's not a danger to trained ranchers. "I know. Maya, he's a wild animal. Even with Silas, there were rules, boundaries. One moment of carelessness." "I know, Dad, but someone has to do it, and it's not going to be you." She said it kindly, but it stung because it was true. Jack didn't have the gift. Barron had made that clear, but Maya did. And the ranch, the real ranch, not the numbers and debts, but the living, breathing legacy Silas had built, needed her more than it needed him. "Your mother will kill me," Jack said. "Mom will understand, eventually. School can be done online. There's homeschool curriculum for ranch kids. You're 16. Grandpa was younger than that when he started working with Bison. I read it in his journals. He was 14 when he raised his first calf by hand." Jack looked at his daughter. When had she grown up? And saw Silas looking back at him. The same determination, the same quiet certainty,
the same connection to this land that Jack could admire but never quite possess. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Okay, but we do this right. We document everything, keep records, prove to anyone who questions it that Barren is manageable under proper stewardship, and the first sign that it's not working, it'll work," Maya said with absolute confidence. "It already chose me. Out there in the storm, he could have stopped me, could have charged like he did to you, but he stepped aside, Dad. He let me help Luna because he recognized something. I don't know if it's my voice or my smell or something else, but he knows I'm Silas's blood, and that matters to him." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, each processing what this meant, the responsibilities, the risks, the fundamental change in their plans and their future. Finally, Maya yawned, adrenaline crash hitting hard. "I'm going to check on Luna one more time, then I need to sleep for about 16 hours. Go ahead, I'll lock up." After she left, Jack remained in the doorway, staring out at the moonlit valley. His phone was still dead, his laptop fried, his carefully planned system of modern ranch management destroyed by one electromagnetic storm and his own hubris. But his daughter was alive, the calf was safe, and Barren, dangerous, unpredictable Barren, had revealed himself to be exactly what Silas had always said, not a monster, but a guardian who knew the difference between threats and family. Jack's hand went to his pocket, feeling the weight of the Evergreen device Maya had found. Tomorrow he'd call the sheriff, start documenting the trespass, begin building a legal defense against whatever was coming. But tonight he just stood there, wearing his father's jacket, feeling the ghost of Silas standing beside him, approving of the choice that had just been made. The technology had failed, the old ways had prevailed, and the legacy had found its new guardian in the least expected place, not in the son who'd run away, but in the granddaughter who was brave enough to blow a whistle in a storm.
Jack woke before dawn, his body still aching from yesterday's ordeal. But something was different, lighter, like a weight he hadn't known he was carrying had lifted. He put on Silas's jacket, his jacket now, truly, and walked out to the barn. The November air was crisp and clean, washed by the storm. Frost covered everything, each blade of grass outlined in silver. Maya was already there, sitting on the fence by the main pasture, the elk-bone whistle in her hands. She wasn't playing it, just holding it, waiting. Jack climbed up beside her without speaking. Together they watched the sun begin to turn the sky from black to gray to gold. And then they saw movement, the herd emerging from the trees where they'd sheltered from the storm. 30 magnificent animals moving in that coordinated way that spoke of millions of years of evolution and survival. And at the front, leading them to the morning grazing ground, was Barren. The great bull walked with purpose and dignity. His scarred eye caught the first rays of sun and seemed to glow. He led his family to safety, to food, to the good grazing that would see them through another day. At the fence line, he stopped, turned, looked directly at where Maya and Jack sat in the growing light. Maya lifted the whistle to her lips and blew softly. The same long, low note from yesterday, an echo across the valley, a greeting between guardians. Barren's ears swiveled forward. He held perfectly still for 3 heartbeats. Then he snorted once, a sound that could have been acknowledgement or dismissal or both.
and returned to leading his herd. But he'd answered. That was the important thing. The echo had been heard. The connection had been acknowledged. Jack put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. You know this changes everything, right? No going back to normal life in Denver. No soccer team. No mall hangouts. This is going to be hard work, dangerous work, every single day. I know. And those developers aren't going to give up. They'll find ways to pressure us, to make things difficult, to turn the community against us if they can. Let 'em try. Jack smiled. That was pure Silas talking, stubborn Miller blood. They sat there as the sun climbed higher, warm in the frost, turning the valley from silver to gold. The herd grazed peacefully. Barron stood at his usual post, watching over them all. And somewhere beyond the ridge, the rest of the world continued on, unaware that something important had just been decided. The Broken Compass Ranch had found its purpose again, not as a business to be optimized or a property to be developed, but as a sanctuary, a place where the old ways were remembered, where wild things were respected, not conquered, where echoes across generations found voices in new guardians. And Barron, the scarred king of Lamar Valley, had found what he'd been searching for since Silas died. Not a replacement for the man he'd loved, but something just as precious, a continuation, a young voice that spoke the old language, a new guardian worthy of the trust. The legacy hadn't ended with Silas's death. It had merely been waiting for someone brave enough to step into the storm, smart enough to put down the screens and pick up the whistle, stubborn enough to stand at the fence line and call to a creature that could kill with a single charge. Maya had done all that, and Barron had answered. This is the Broken Compass Ranch, where legends are born, where the wild still remembers, and where a 16-year-old girl just learned that some bonds transcend species, time, and even death itself. What secrets did Silas hide about the land beneath their feet? What will Evergreen Developments do when they realize the Millers won't sell? And what other tests will Barron set before he truly accepts Maya as his new companion? The answers lie ahead in the untold stories still waiting in the valley's silence. This is Bison Echoes, where the modern frontier meets ancient legends, where family legacy battles corporate greed, where technology fails, but the old wisdom prevails. Subscribe and follow this journey, because the Miller family's story is just beginning, and Barron has many more echoes to share.